Steve, they haven't had 3% GDP growth in a couple of decades, that is as low as that, nor have they had a declining population since the early 1960s. What should we expect from China this year?
No, that's right. This year, I think it's going to be slow growth as well. Tyler, if you start and go sort of short term out to long term, short term, what we're seeing in the GDP data, one of the lower ones that they've put up on a quarterly basis, is essentially the effects of the zero COVID policy and the shutdown of the economy. But you move out from the quarterly data and then go to the annual data, the annual GDP data, what you see is declining GDP over time. And what that is probably a reflection of is the demographic issue. And that demographic issue, Tyler, is one of declining population growth for a country that's trying to do 5.5% growth, but the best it could do was 3%.
I mean, it's the population piece of the puzzle is certainly a really big one, and it's going to be a long-term situation that plays out. Steve, in the meantime, given the reopening situation, I mean, we have not actually seen a major economy reopen in a linear fashion to date. So there seems to be almost this baked-in assumption that that could be the case with China, and thus it could be inflationary for things like certain types of commodities, but maybe not, right? I mean, not if recent history is any indicator.
Well, you know, before you get to the question of is China reopening inflationary or deflationary, you've got to ask yourself the question, is it even reopening? And when you look at that question, you know, there is not a country that's had a major outbreak that has gotten through unscathed. I talked to Carl Weinberg, chief global economist at HFE. What he told me is he thinks absenteeism is going to be a big issue. He thinks supply chain issues are going to happen. He called the Lunar New Year one of the biggest super spreader events of all time. And so he doesn't think China's through the worst. He thinks the idea of playing the China reopening is premature at best.
What do you make of indications that China and Xi Jinping has or is about to loosen restrictions on the tech sector in China? In other words, that sector has been under a lot of pressure for a couple of years, and there are signals now that maybe the worst of that, from the point of view of the tech sector there, is over.
I'm going to leave reading the Chinese leadership to our great colleague Eunice Yoon, Tyler, but I will say this. I hope it means that they're reading the writing on the wall that China as an economic superpower does not exist in isolation, and that the moves that Xi has made have been those that have essentially isolated China, taken it out of global commerce, and made it into less of an economic superpower. And hopefully he's learning what his predecessors learned, which is that integration is the way toward economic prosperity, not disintegration.
All right. Thank you very much. Steve Leisman reporting.